G'day guys and welcome back. I've never before taken on such a huge undertaking as I'm about to. This will no doubt spread over many videos. I'm thinking at least 3. Breaking the original video up into 3 sections. We'll see how it goes though. The channel in question isn't known for making conspiracy videos and generally research their videos quite well. However, I feel they've made a grave error in judgment relating to one video in particular. This video was brought to my attention by a subscriber via Discord, which link is below, as you know. It's there every week. I mention it. You don't seem to be joining though. Anyway, enjoy. Before we begin to break down the video, let's take a quick look at the sources, as I think this will help you understand the biases represented in the video. As you can see, a list of 23 sources is provided. We can strike out the first 2, as the second reference is simply a return to the first reference, which is simply the definition of witness according to Jewish tradition. Source 3 is simply Bible passages from Mark, John, Luke and Matthew. Source 4 also relates to the Bible, however this refers to passages that were left out. Why they were left out is irrelevant, as they have no supporting evidence. Source 5 is only interesting in that it merely attempts to date the oldest known copies of the New Testament, but once again it is referring to the Bible. The next 2 sources are more interesting. The testimony of Josephus is known to be a fraud and is often cited by apologists despite this. Tacitus is often misquoted as mentioning Jesus. However, he only mentions Christus, which is a title meaning anointed and not the name of a person. Source number 8 is from a Bible study website and cannot be trusted to be unbiased. Wikipedia, however, mentions that, and I quote, "Few details are known about Clement's life. Clement was said to have been consecrated by Peter the Apostle, and he is known to have been a leading member of the church in Rome in the late 1st century." Why wouldn't they have used Wikipedia as a source? Which brings us to source 9. Don't worry, the next ones are easy. A cherry-picked reference to James's death showing the fraud of Josephus mentioned earlier. He is the only one referred to him as the brother of Jesus. Yet another biblical reference that can be dismissed, much like sources 10 and 11, which again refer to the Gospels as their sources. Source 12 is a 3-hour debate about the same topic we're discussing in this video. Source 13 is either a Christian film from 2017 or a book from 2016, which it appears the book is based on. Either way, it's a story of an atheist who finds religion trying to find evidence of Jesus. Both sound utterly thrilling. Source 14 is a repeat of source 8, so that's cheating. Come on, Infographics, you're better than this. Sources 15 to 19 are from debates between apologists or from biased sources. Their sources primarily come from the Bible. Sources 20 to 23 are once again passages from the Bible and once again can be dismissed. You may wonder why I dismiss the Bible as a source. It's simple. The Bible is not a historical document in any way. Okay, now that that's out of the way, let's dive into the video. As it's a long video, I will timestamp every cut so you know it's not taken out of context, and the link will be in the description below.
With 1 out of every 3 people on Earth identifying as a Christian, it's the single most important event in human history. But was Jesus of Nazareth really resurrected from the dead? And is there any evidence for it? To examine the question, first we have to establish the historicity of Jesus himself. While some doubt that he ever lived, no critical historian alive today doubts that Jesus of Nazareth was a real man who lived and died in the time attributed to him in the Gospels.
No critical historian doubts he lived? By that you mean no theological historian, as there are plenty of historians who doubt his existence. Along with the lack of anything outside of biblical references, there is also no archaeological evidence, with the only possible reference to an archaeological discovery reported by Ken Dark in an effort to sell his latest book on the matter. There is no evidence for what he discovered being little more than an underground dwelling, but no doubt we'll get more into that history later in the video.
The Jewish historian Flavius Josephus mentions Jesus twice in the histories.
Josephus has been known to be a forgery for hundreds of years. It is still stated as fact though.
His first mention is widely regarded even amongst Christian scholars as having been doctored by a later Christian scribe to be more flattering, but still mentions Jesus as having been condemned and crucified by Roman authorities. The second mention of Jesus by Josephus is when he references the death of Jesus' brother James, who was stoned to death for his belief in Jesus as the Christ. Jesus is also mentioned by the Roman historian Tacitus approximately 86 years after his crucifixion and affirms that he was in fact crucified by Roman authorities and that a sizable contingent of his believers were present in Rome at the time of this writing.
Tacitus only refers to Christus, which means the anointed, a title, not a person, as I've mentioned earlier.
Which further strengthens the biblical account of St. Paul. Next, we have to establish the reliability of the evidence used to argue that the resurrection was a real event, namely Paul's letters and the synoptic Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke.
As the Bible is not even a historically accurate or even remotely historical document, the Gospels should be treated no differently than the words of any other mythological book. There were numerous other historians living in the general area around that time that all of this took place. Let's see what they have to say on the matter. Nothing? How can that be? This dude walking around with all of these followers, creating fish and bread from thin air and raising the dead, weren't available for his demise, or any of his life. How unfortunate.
Today, that material is together along with other books known as the New Testament, and a critic would be right in arguing that one cannot use one's own source material to argue for the validity of his or her argument.
Woohoo! Self-awareness. Good to see that you have that. This is where the video should end. But no, it goes on for another 27 minutes, depending if it's got a sponsor or not. I'll cut that out anyway, don't you worry.
Except that it's a serious misunderstanding of what the New Testament actually is, or what it originally was. Today, the New Testament is considered to be the second half of Christianity's holy book, the Bible.
That doesn't negate it from being the source material citing itself as the source.
Yet before it was largely codified around 200 AD, the New Testament was a collection of apocalyptic revelations, letters to various churches, and the formal writing down of oral tradition in the form of Gospels. Specifically, Paul's letters and the Synoptic Gospels are considered to be valid historical documents that, due to their content, were later turned into a holy book.
This is not entirely accurate. The epistles of Paul were not all written by Paul, and if they were, the first of which was written some 14 to 20 years after the supposed death of Jesus, when Paul was in his early 50s. Not to mention that the collection of sage letters was some 150 years after the death of Paul.
In the words of historian and New Testament scholar Dr. Gary Habermas, if you don't use the historically accepted books of the New Testament to argue for the historicity of Jesus, then critics will use them for you.
Of course a Christian apologist would say that. I mean, a guy who, and I quote, has dedicated his professional life to the examination of the relevant historical, philosophical and theological issues surrounding the death and resurrection of Jesus, and has missed the obvious lack of other evidence, should probably consider a career change.
But have the Gospels reliably preserved historical details throughout the ages, and are Paul's letters still in their original form and untampered with for the purpose of empowering a Christian agenda?
Oh no. I won't be fooled by your words of wisdom again. You tried that before and I was disappointed. Also, the answer is no.
Historian, New Testament scholar, and textual critic Bart Ehrman himself, an agnostic leaning toward atheism, points out that we don't have the original autographs by which to authenticate the modern Gospels and Paul's letters.
Why did your tone change at what Ehrman says? He is correct that we don't have the signatures. The next minute or so has been skipped as it doesn't relate to anything, but it does show how there are fabrications in the Bible. Feel free to watch it at your discretion.
In further questioning the historical reliability of the Gospels, Ehrman also points out that between various surviving ancient copies of the biblical texts are thousands of errors, and that the first written versions of the Gospels and Paul's letters weren't created until decades after Jesus' death, leaving plenty of room for details to be omitted, forgotten, or outright fabricated.
See, that's what I said before, and I'm not a biblical scholar.
Paul's first letter to the Corinthian church wasn't written until 55 AD, with the Gospel of Mark being written in 70 AD, Matthew in 80 AD, and John in 95 AD. That's a spread of 25 to 65 years after the death of Jesus. So, with made-up stories, thousands of textual errors in the earliest available copies, and such a massive time gap between Jesus' death and his history being recorded, is there any reason to think the New Testament is historically reliable?
No, there isn't. So why is there still 25 minutes of this video left? Unless we're going into the what if territory. Oh, I like that.
It's well established that teachings about Jesus spread far and wide very quickly after his death. In fact, within as little as 2 to 3 years after the crucifixion, Jewish authorities were already persecuting Christians across the Near East in a bid to exterminate what they viewed as a heretical cult. The wide geographic dissemination of the core Christian knowledge about Jesus and his life events makes it incredibly unlikely that major revisions could have taken place without them being discovered.
Not really. Word of mouth spreads. Minor changes are either accepted or corrected rather quickly, especially in small groups. We see this in modern cults today. It's how cults work.
If, for example, Christian leaders in Rome wished to greatly change a core fact of the life, death, or teachings of Jesus, believers in Africa, which has one of the world's oldest Christian communities, would have immediately identified the manipulation. The simple fact that we today are able to know that the story of Jesus and the adulterous woman was a fabrication is testament to how difficult it can be to make even minor changes to the text without them being discovered, thanks to the wide geographic distribution of the original material.
The people couldn't. Yes, but that distribution took place decades or even hundreds of years after the alleged crucifixion. It wasn't a case of crucifixion, poof, suddenly Ethiopia has the highest population of believers. No, it spread over time. People fleeing from Jewish persecution would have brought their stories further south into Africa. Unknown and isn't the issue. The issue is the authenticity of the original texts, the authenticity of the authors, and any other supporting evidence, for which there is none. In the next part, we'll be going deeper into the backstory, with the Dead Sea Scrolls, and all that fun stuff. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, hit the bell icon so you're notified when it comes out, and share this with others who you think will find it interesting. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, a special thank you to Purple Haze, Caustic, and Lisa for their support over on Patreon, as well as the other patron supporters. You know who you are. And until next time, don't be a dick.